Fellow soil enthusiasts, I've got to share something that completely blew my mind last spring. I was out in my raised beds, frustrated with the slow progress of my traditional compost pile, when I accidentally discovered what might be the fastest way to attract earthworms to your garden beds. It happened purely by chance when I dropped some rotting kitchen scraps directly into one of my struggling raised beds, and within hours, I kid you not, hours, the soil was teeming with worms that seemed to appear from absolutely nowhere. This discovery has revolutionized how I think about soil biology and worm attraction. Today I'm going to share exactly what happened, why it works so incredibly well, and how you can replicate this phenomenon in your own garden to create thriving, worm-rich soil faster than any composting method I've ever tried. Picture this. It was a particularly busy Saturday morning and I was rushing to get my raised beds prepped for the season. I had a container of kitchen scraps that I was supposed to take to my compost bin, but in my haste I accidentally knocked it over directly onto the soil of my newest raised bed. We're talking about really decomposed stuff, slimy lettuce leaves, mushy banana peels, coffee grounds that had been sitting for days, and some seriously funky onion skins. My first instinct was to clean it up, but something made me pause. The soil in this particular bed had been lifeless. I'd filled it with store-bought soil mix that looked good but felt sterile. So instead of cleaning up my mess, I decided to just work those rotting scraps directly into the top few inches of soil and see what happened. When I checked back that evening, I couldn't believe my eyes. The soil that had been compacted and dead that morning was now alive with earthworms. Not just a few stragglers, but dozens of them, all different sizes, working through the soil like they owned the place. Where'd they come from? How did they find this spot so quickly? Here's the science behind what I witnessed, and it's fascinating. When organic matter begins to decompose, it releases specific chemical signals that earthworms can detect from surprising distances. Fresh compost, while valuable, doesn't emit these signals nearly as strongly because the decomposition process is more controlled and slower. Rotting scraps, on the other hand, are in active decay. They're producing exactly the compounds that earthworms use to locate food sources: carbon dioxide from microbial respiration, organic acids from fermentation, and volatile compounds that act like dinner bells for these underground engineers. The more advanced the decomposition, the stronger these chemical signals become. Think of it this way: earthworms don't want to work harder than they have to. Fresh organic matter requires them to wait for the decomposition process to begin. But when you place already rotting material directly in their path, you're essentially laying out a buffet that's ready to eat right now. The moisture content of rotting scraps also plays a crucial role. Earthworms need moisture to breathe through their skin, and decomposing organic matter creates the perfect microenvironment of dampness and nutrients that draws them in like a magnet. What most gardeners don't realize is that earthworms create extensive tunnel networks throughout the soil, often extending far beyond what we can see. These tunnels connect different areas of your garden in ways that would surprise you. When you create a concentrated food source with rotting scraps, you're essentially putting up a giant neon sign that says, "All you can eat buffet," this way along their underground highway system. Worms can travel much greater distances through soil than most people imagine, especially when following scent trails. That's why they seem to appear out of nowhere. They're not actually coming from nowhere. They're following established pathways from other areas of your property, neighboring yards, and even quite distant locations when the chemical signals are strong enough. This is also why this method works so much faster than traditional composting. Your compost pile might be attracting worms, but it's usually located away from your growing beds. When you place decomposing material directly where you want the worms to work, you're bringing the attraction right to the point of action. Now, before you start throwing every piece of old food into your raised beds, let me share the proper technique I've developed through months of experimentation. The key is strategic placement and the right type of organic matter. So, start with vegetable scraps that are well into the decomposition process. We're talking about materials that are soft, slimy, and definitely past their prime. Coffee grounds are absolute gold for this method, especially when they've started to develop that slightly funky smell. Banana peels that have turned completely black work incredibly well, as do lettuce leaves that have gone completely limp and slimy. Next, create small pockets in your raised bed soil, about 4 to 6 inches deep and roughly the size of your fist. Place your rotting scraps into these pockets and cover them with 2 to 3 inches of soil. The partial burial is crucial. It prevents odors and pest issues while still allowing the chemical signals to permeate through the soil layers. Now, space these pockets throughout your bed, roughly 18 to 24 inches apart. This creates multiple attraction points that will draw worms from different directions and establish a network of activity throughout the entire bed. You know, the beauty of this method is that it's self-regulating. As the earthworms arrive and begin processing the rotting material, they create their own waste products, castings, that further improve the soil structure and fertility. Within just a few weeks, you'll notice that the areas around your scrap pockets have become noticeably darker and more crumbly. It's important to monitor the moisture levels carefully during this process. The decomposing scraps will create their own moisture initially, but you really want to maintain consistent dampness throughout the bed. If the area becomes too dry, the worms will migrate away to find better conditions elsewhere. One thing I've learned is to refresh the rotting material every 2 to 3 weeks during the active growing season. As the worms consume the initial scraps, adding new decomposing material keeps them engaged and prevents them from moving on to other areas. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room: odors and pests. When done correctly, this method really shouldn't create significant odor problems. The key here is proper burial depth and just avoiding materials that are prone to anaerobic decomposition, like meat or dairy products. So, stick to plant-based materials and you'll find that any smells are minimal and honestly, pretty short-lived. If you're concerned about attracting unwanted pests, here's a tip. Focus on scraps that are less appealing to surface animals. Coffee grounds, tea bags, and vegetable peels that are well decomposed are perfect because they're mainly attractive to soil organisms, not raccoons or other garden visitors. For those worried about plant pathogens, remember this: healthy soil biology actually helps suppress many plant diseases. The increased earthworm activity improves drainage and creates more balanced soil conditions that favor beneficial microorganisms over harmful ones. So, to get the absolute best results from this technique, timing really does matter. You'll want to implement this method during the active growing season, when soil temperatures are consistently above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Earthworms are way more active and mobile during those warmer months, so honestly, your success rate will be dramatically higher. You should also consider the existing conditions of your raised beds. Beds that already have some organic matter present will see faster results than those with completely sterile soil mixes. If you're starting out with very poor soil, you might want to add a thin layer of aged compost or leaf mold first, just to create a more welcoming environment. The pH of your soil also influences earthworm activity. Most earthworms actually prefer slightly acidic to neutral soil conditions, somewhere between pH 6.0 and 7.0. If your soil is very alkaline, consider adding some organic matter like coffee grounds or pine needles to gradually adjust the pH while providing food sources. What you're really doing with this method is kickstarting a complete transformation of your soil's biological activity. Those earthworms aren't just processing your kitchen scraps, they're aerating compacted soil, mixing nutrients throughout the bed, and creating channels for water infiltration and root growth. The casting production alone is worth the effort. Earthworm castings are some of the finest natural fertilizer you can get, with a perfect balance of nutrients and beneficial microorganisms. By concentrating earthworm activity in your raised beds, you're essentially turning your growing areas into casting production facilities. Within a full growing season of using this method, you'll notice that your soil structure has completely changed. What started as dense, lifeless growing medium becomes loose, dark, and incredibly fertile. Plants grown in this transformed soil show improved vigor, better disease resistance, and significantly increased yields. Ready to revolutionize your raised beds and create the most fertile soil your garden has ever seen? Try this rotting scrap method in just one bed this season, and watch the transformation happen before your eyes. The results will speak for themselves, and you'll never look at kitchen scraps the same way again. If this technique transforms your garden like it did mine, make sure to subscribe to Soil Sensei for more underground secrets that can take your gardening to the next level. And don't keep this discovery to yourself. Share this article with fellow gardeners who are ready to work smarter, not harder, in creating thriving soil ecosystems. Your garden beds will thank you, and so will the earthworms.